1882, Nebraska Territory. The wind screamed across the flat prairie like it had lost something. Dry grasses bent and whispered, and far off, a prairie fire clawed its way along the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of rust and smoke. A train whistle cut through the wind's cry, sharp and distant. Cassie Willow stepped off the last iron carriage into dirt and dust. Her boots sank half an inch into the earth, and no one stood waiting. One hand clutched the single valise she owned, the other a crumpled letter, edges worn thin from too many rereads. The ink bled slightly where her tears had fallen the day she received it. Jacob Cole, she whispered to herself, her voice nearly drowned by the wind. Her husband, by letter, by law, but never by sight, had written of his homestead, of needing a wife not just for company, but to help raise his children after their mother died from fever. She had written back, accepted. He had sent for her. But now, nothing. A tall man in dusty overalls approached from the small depot building, adjusting his suspenders with a crooked hand. He looked at her like one might look at a bird who'd flown into the wrong barn. "You Cassie Willow?" he asked. "I am." "Jacob didn't come to fetch you," he said slowly, like testing the truth. Well, best I take you there." She didn't ask more. Just followed. The wagon ride to the Cole homestead was jarring. The sky felt too big, and the land too empty. Cottonwoods rose like skeletal fingers near creeks, and old fences sagged with time. The driver, who introduced himself only as Alton, didn't speak much more. Just clucked at the mule and let the wheels crunch on. When the house came into view, Cassie's heart sank. The paint was stripped bare from wind and sun. The barn door hung sideways on one hinge. Chickens pecked near a broken fence post, but no smoke rose from the chimney. No movement inside. She stepped down from the wagon, her skirts catching on a bramble. Alton tipped his hat with pity in his eyes, then turned and left, not offering to help with her bag. Cassie stood in front of the silent house and knocked. No answer. She pushed the door open. It creaked like something wounded. Inside, the air was thick with stale bread, soot, and something worse, neglect. A pot sat cold on the stove. Ashes hadn't been cleaned in weeks. Then came the sound, a sharp clatter from the back room. Cassie froze. Another thud. Then a small voice. "Emmett, she's got a bag." A child. Then more. By the time she stepped into the next room, 7 pairs of eyes were watching her from every corner, dirty, hollow-eyed children. The eldest, a boy of 14 maybe, stood with a small axe in his hands. His frame was thin, but his stance was defensive. He didn't blink. "Who are you?" he demanded. Cassie stepped forward, slowly. "I'm Cassie Willow. I was meant to be your father's wife." No one moved. The littlest, no older than 2, clung to the leg of a girl a few years older. "He didn't say nothin'," the boy snapped. Cassie knelt down, eye level with him. "I got letters. He sent for me." "Is he not?" "Dead," the boy said flatly. 2 weeks back. Horse kicked him in the creek bed. Emmett buried him himself." Silence swallowed the room. Cassie's throat tightened. Not from grief, she hadn't known Jacob, but from the sudden, breathless understanding of what this meant. These children were alone. And so was she. "You got no place here," Emmett said, setting the axe down but keeping a firm gaze. "We're doin' fine." Cassie scanned the room. They weren't fine. Dirt smeared their faces. One girl's dress was soiled and torn. The youngest had dried blood on her foot, an old cut, untreated. And yet they stood together like a tribe of orphans too proud to beg. She set down her valise. "I'm not leaving," she said, softly but firmly. That night, Cassie slept in the corner of the parlor with one eye open. No one had spoken to her after that. They had watched her eat a crust of stale bread and drink water from a rusty tin cup. Emmett posted himself near the hearth like a sentry, arms crossed. The others retreated to their beds, or piles of blankets, at least. She heard one cry, muffled. But no one comforted them. By morning, she'd already milked the lean cow and started a fire. The children emerged slowly, surprised to see the stove warm, coffee on the boil. No one spoke. But none turned away the bread she served either. Later, she walked into town, 10 miles on foot. The town wasn't much, 2 saloons, a church, a mercantile, and a lot of sideways glances. The town matron, a narrow-shouldered woman named Mrs. Headley, invited her inside only to say what the others whispered. "There's no legal marriage," she said. "You came out here on faith, Miss Willow. Jacob Cole never registered no license. You've got no claim." "I've got children who need fed," Cassie said. Mrs. Headley raised an eyebrow. "You've got children you've never met. That boy Emmett, he's half wild. Ran off the schoolteacher twice." "I'm not trying to take anything," Cassie said. "Just stay. Stay, and you'll answer for them," the matron warned. "Their debts. Their messes." Cassie left without asking for help. That night, the wind returned. The roof moaned. She patched it with burlap and nails she found in the barn. Her hands blistered. The blisters broke. When she entered the house, Emmett stood in the kitchen doorway. "You ain't got to stay." Cassie looked at him, eyes raw from smoke and grit. "I know." "Then why?" "Because someone should." He didn't reply. Just turned, and walked back into the dark. That night, as she sat on the porch with a lantern beside her, the fire on the distant prairie flared again, a low red glow on the edge of the world. She watched it in silence until something tugged gently on her skirt. Lily, the youngest, looked up with wide eyes and a thumb in her mouth. Wordless, she climbed into Cassie's lap and rested her head against her chest. The lantern cast a warm circle around them, and for the first time in days, the wind stilled. Cassie wrapped her arms around the child and stared into the dark. She didn't say it aloud, but she knew then, she wasn't going back. The days blurred into one another like dust across the horizon. Cassie worked with a quiet urgency, as though motion itself might anchor her to this life. She rose before dawn, mended boots with twine, traded eggs in town for flour and soap, and returned each night sore but unyielding. The children still kept their distance. Emmett watched her with the suspicion of a cornered animal. Ruth, the second eldest, followed orders but never smiled. The younger ones, Lily, Daniel, and twins May and Martha, trailed behind her in silence, watching every movement like they were trying to learn her by heart before deciding if they should trust her. It was 2 weeks after her arrival when the storm rolled in. Cassie smelled it before she saw it, metallic air, thick as syrup, pressing low against her lungs. The sky turned a deep, mottled green, unnatural and humming with static. The prairie went quiet. No bird calls. No crickets. Just the distant roar of wind gathering its strength like a clenched fist. She burst into the yard, shouting. "Inside! All of you, now!" The children ran, barefoot and wide-eyed. Emmett grabbed Lily as thunder cracked the sky wide open. Rain came fast, like thrown nails, and the wind screamed across the plain, snapping one of the barn doors clear off its hinges. Cassie barely made it to the root cellar, the last to descend the stone steps as the wind peeled the shingles from the roof above. Inside, the earth walls were cool and damp. Darkness wrapped around them like a shroud, save for the flickering light of a single oil lamp. The twins whimpered. Ruth held their hands tight. Emmett sat stone still, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if listening to the wind's every threat. Cassie took a deep breath and wrapped a blanket around Lily, who was shaking. "You ever seen a storm like this?" Emmett asked suddenly. Cassie looked at him. "Not since I was a girl. Took my uncle's barn clean off. Laid the roof a mile away." He said nothing more, but something shifted in his eyes. Less steel. More weight. Hours passed before the wind died. When they climbed out, the house looked like it had been through war. The porch roof was gone, half the barn flattened, and the chicken coop scattered across the field. But they were alive. The next day, she found the back fence torn apart. Tracks, large, booted, led in and out, disappearing toward the foothills. Someone had been there during the storm. That night, Cassie sat with the rifle across her lap. Not to scare the children, but to be ready. Something gnawed at her gut. This place was too isolated. Too exposed. The next morning, she followed the tracks past the bluff and into the timber. The trees whispered among themselves, and the air felt colder here. She hadn't gone more than half a mile when she saw him. He stood by a stream, skin browned by sun and wind, wearing a duster coat and wide-brimmed hat. A pack mule stood beside him, saddlebags heavy. A long scar cut down one side of his face, disappearing into the stubble on his jaw. His eyes were sharp and unreadable. He didn't startle. Didn't move. "You were at the house," she said. He said nothing. Cassie's fingers tightened on the rifle. "You took nothing. Why come during a storm?" Still no reply. He turned to his mule and began tying a bundle. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and rasped. "I wasn't hiding. Just passing through." "Then why did you circle the house twice?" He paused. Looked up. "You had lantern light in the cellar. That storm was enough to tear a soul from their skin. Just wanted to see if anyone made it through." Cassie studied him. "You got a name?" "Wade." He turned to leave, but she spoke again. "You hungry?" He hesitated. A long beat. Then nodded once. That night, he sat at the far end of the porch, silent as the stars. He didn't come inside. Just accepted the plate of cornbread and beans she handed him, and ate with a quiet reverence. The children watched from the windows, whispering. In the days that followed, Wade came and went like a ghost, never asking, never intruding. He helped reinforce the barn wall with salvaged timber, reset the fallen fence, and hunted a deer that fed the children for 3 days. Still, he said little. Cassie began to trust him. Not from what he said, but from what he did. When Emmett fell and split his shin on a rusted plow, Wade cleaned the wound with clean rags and whiskey. When the chimney flue jammed, he climbed up and cleared it, blackened with soot and silent as ever. But Emmett hated him. "He's hiding something," the boy muttered one night. "Men like that don't help unless they want something." Cassie looked at him. "What do you think he wants?" Emmett shrugged. "Don't care. He's not family." She didn't reply, but her eyes lingered on the doorway where Wade had disappeared minutes earlier. The days cooled. The first frost touched the earth, glittering on the roof beams at dawn. Wade came less often, staying longer in the hills. But Cassie always left a plate out, and each morning, it was empty. One evening, as dusk painted the land gold, Cassie found Wade standing at the edge of the field, looking out toward the tree-line. "You planning on leaving for good?" she asked. "I always leave," he said. "You don't have to." His gaze lingered on the horizon, long and mournful. "I've lived too long on the edges of things. It's easier that way." Cassie stepped closer. "Maybe it's time to stop surviving and start belonging." He looked at her then, really looked. And for a moment, something softened. But then he turned away. "Storms don't always come with rain," he said. "Sometimes they wear boots and carry rifles." Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone again, vanishing into the dusk like smoke. Later that night, as she tucked the younger children into bed and stirred the coals in the hearth, she found a small wooden carving on the table, a horse, rough-hewn and simple, but carefully made. Lily clutched it in her sleep. Cassie stepped onto the porch, arms crossed against the cold. The prairie lay still under a crescent moon, but her heart beat heavy. Wade was right. Not all storms came with thunder. Some had names and old debts and unfinished grudges. And she had a feeling that storm was already riding their way. The first shot shattered the pre-dawn silence like glass under boot. Cassie jolted upright in bed, heart hammering, the echoes still bouncing off the timber walls. A second shot followed, closer this time. Then the sound of a horse screaming. Then nothing. She threw the blanket aside and grabbed the rifle from the wall. Feet bare, breath sharp in her lungs, she crossed to the boys' room. Emmett was already up, clutching a hunting knife with white knuckles. "They're here," he said, voice thin but steady. Cassie met his eyes. "Take the girls to the root cellar. Lock the hatch. Don't open it until I call. I can fight." "Not yet. Get them safe." She didn't wait to argue. The thunder of hooves outside told her the enemy wasn't waiting either. She slipped through the kitchen door, rifle raised, crouching low behind the chopping block. The moon hung dim behind morning clouds, the horizon still dark. But she could make out 3 figures on horseback circling the barn, lean, cruel silhouettes. One carried a torch. Another had something slung over his saddle. A shout broke through the wind. "We know someone's here. Don't make us come find you." Cassie's jaw clenched. These weren't drifters. This was personal. The barn caught fire first. Flames roared up the side like a hungry beast, orange and gold licking at the sky. One of the riders laughed. Then she saw him. Wade stepped from the tree line, coat billowing behind him, rifle slung low. No words. No warning. The man nearest him barely had time to turn before a shot cracked through the stillness and knocked him clean off his horse. Chaos exploded. Cassie fired next, catching the torchbearer in the shoulder. He spun, screamed, and dropped the flame. His horse bolted into the night. The last man kicked his mare into a full gallop, racing toward the house with a pistol raised. Cassie didn't have time to reload. But she didn't have to. Wade was faster. He lunged from the smoke, tackled the rider clean off the horse, and slammed him into the dirt. The gun skidded into the weeds. They wrestled, fists landing like hammers. The rider, grizzled, bearded, face smeared with black powder, drew a knife. Wade caught his wrist and twisted until bone cracked. Cassie ran toward them, boots crunching over frosted grass, rifle reloaded. The man shrieked and spat as Wade held him down. "You don't know what you're messing with," the man hissed. "That land's owed." Cassie leveled the rifle. "Owed to who?" "Tom Granger," the man spat. This here was his brother's claim. He wants it back. Cassie felt the world tilt. "Your brother was William Granger?" The man sneered. "That drunk?" "Yeah. You married his ghost, lady. He died owing us." Wade looked at her. His eyes said everything. This was the storm. Cassie's voice was flat. "He's not owed anything. This is the children's land now. You think law matters out here?" The man laughed. "You're just a—" Cassie cut him off with the barrel pressed to his forehead. "A mother. That's enough." The man shut up. Wade tied him up with his own reins. The other two weren't getting up. The barn burned low by dawn, embers casting shadows across the prairie. Ash fell like snow. Cassie stood outside the root cellar and called softly. "Emmett. It's me." The hatch creaked open. The children emerged one by one, blinking in the smoke-dusted morning. May clutched her sister's hand. Daniel's eyes were wide and hollow. Ruth ran to Cassie and wrapped her arms around her waist without a word. Cassie pulled them all in, holding tight. You're safe now. Wade stood nearby, silent, eyes on the horizon. Cassie walked to him. You stayed, she said. He nodded. I don't leave things unfinished. You could have walked away. Before the fire. Before the fighting. He looked down. I almost did. Cassie searched his face. Why didn't you? He hesitated. Because you didn't. You came here with nothing but words on a page and 7 mouths to feed. You didn't run when you saw what this place really was. You fought for it. I'm still fighting, she whispered. Then you shouldn't have to do it alone. Cassie reached into her pocket and pulled out the carved horse he'd made. She pressed it into his hand. You belong here, Wade. If you want to. He looked at the carving like it was something sacred. Then nodded. The days that followed were spent rebuilding. Neighbors, having seen the smoke, came down from distant homesteads to offer help, tools, timber, strong hands. No one asked too many questions. The West had its own language, scars, silence, and the people you chose to stand beside. The children began to change. Emmett followed Wade now, learning how to set snares and clean a buck. Ruth cooked beside Cassie, asking questions instead of giving orders. Lily laughed for the first time in weeks. The twins sang while sweeping ash from the floor. Cassie no longer felt like an outsider. She felt like their mother. One evening, after supper, she read aloud from a letter she'd written but never sent. To whom it may concern, she read. My name is Cassie Thorne, and I came to the Wyoming frontier as a mail-order bride. I arrived to find no husband waiting, only 7 children and a broken home. I stayed because love isn't born from blood, but from choosing to stand in the fire for someone else. The room was quiet, save for the crackling hearth. She looked at them, her children, this wild family, and Wade, and smiled through the tears. I may not be what you expected, she said, voice thick. But I'll be what you need. I'll be your mother, if you'll let me. Daniel stood and walked over, laying his small hand in hers. Then the others followed, one by one. And Cassie Thorne, mail-order bride, stranger, widow of a ghost, became the name they whispered when they were scared, the arms they ran to when thunder rolled, the voice that meant they were safe. She didn't need a husband to build this life. She needed courage. She needed fire. And above all, she needed them. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe family is forged in the fire, not by blood, then give this video a like, leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful frontier stories like this one. And remember, sometimes, the ones who choose us are the ones who save us.